Chris, a young singer, saves a mystical being named Ruie from the ocean, who grants him 3 wishes. As they bond, Chris learns the depths of love, loss, and liberation. Faced with heart-wrenching choices and unforeseen consequences, will Chris use his final wish wisely or succumb to his deepest fears? How far would you go when destiny tests your morals? If you want to dive into real stories of parallel realities every day, in enigmatic, technological worlds that are completely different from our planet, subscribe to our channel and leave your like. Well, let's go. Chris Holloway, a 26-year-old aspiring singer with sandy blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, often found solace in the early morning walks along the quiet beach near his modest home. The rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the shore had a calming effect on his restless mind, burdened with dreams of a music career that had yet to take off. Accompanied by his loyal dog, Sammy, a golden retriever with a perpetually wagging tail, Chris strolled casually, his thoughts drifting between past regrets and future aspirations. On this particular morning, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky with hues of orange and pink, Chris's reverie was shattered by a distant, desperate cry for help. The cry echoed eerily across the water, sending a chill down his spine. Reacting on instinct, Chris scanned the horizon and saw a figure struggling against the relentless waves. Heart-pounding, Chris threw off his jacket and sprinted towards the water. His mind, normally so cluttered with worries and doubts, focused sharply on the task at hand. He plunged into the frigid ocean, his muscles straining against the cold and the current. Despite his inadequate swimming skills, the urgency of the situation propelled him forward. The water surged around him, each wave a battleground against which he fought with every ounce of strength. The taste of salt water filled his mouth, and his limbs began to tire. Just as his determination gave way to panic, a powerful grip seized his arm, dragging him back towards the shore. Coughing and sputtering, Chris found himself face to face with Babin, the local lifeguard. Babin Kearns was a towering figure, with a physique honed from years of training and an unyielding resolve. His dark eyes, framed by sun-etched lines, radiated both authority and compassion. Without a word, he pulled Chris to safety and then immediately swam back out to rescue the person still struggling in the waves. Chris watched in awe as Babin executed a swift and precise rescue, bringing the distressed swimmer back to shore with practiced ease. Exhausted and shivering, Chris collapsed onto the sandy beach, his dog Sammy licking his face anxiously. The ordeal had left him physically drained and mentally shaken. He gazed up at Babin, who was administering first aid to the rescued individual, a young woman who appeared to be no older than Chris himself. Physically fine but emotionally rattled, Chris was filled with a mixture of relief and curiosity. The entire episode felt surreal, as if he had stepped into a different reality for a brief moment. The morning light, once serene and comforting, now seemed harsh and intrusive. Chris couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much larger, something that would lead him far beyond the confines of his ordinary existence. After ensuring the woman's well-being, Babin turned his attention to Chris, offering a nod of acknowledgement. "You did well out there," he said, his voice steady and reassuring. Chris managed a weak smile in response, but the lifeguard's words barely registered. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was the woman they had saved, and what had brought her to such a perilous situation? As Chris began the walk back home, Sammy trotting by his side, he couldn't shake the thought of the mysterious woman. His thoughts were interrupted sporadically by flashes of the morning's events, the desperate cry for help, the relentless waves, Babin's heroic efforts. It all seemed like fragments of a distant dream, yet the physical exhaustion he felt was a stark reminder of its reality. Upon reaching home, Chris was greeted by familiar sights and scents that barely registered in his dazed state. His modest living room, with its worn but comfortable furniture and framed photos of family and friends, felt like a haven of normalcy amidst the chaos of the morning. Yet, something had shifted within him. He felt an inexplicable restlessness, an undercurrent of anticipation that he couldn't quite pinpoint. As he settled into his favorite armchair, his thoughts once again drifted to his stalled singing career. Music had always been Chris's greatest passion, a way to express the emotions he found difficult to articulate otherwise. However, a lack of opportunities and persistent self-doubt had kept him from pursuing it wholeheartedly. Now, in the wake of the morning's events, he felt a newfound determination stirring within him. The experience had shown him the fragility of life and the importance of seizing moments of significance. Just as Chris began to contemplate his next steps, a sudden, inexplicable light filled the room. It was not the harsh glare of morning sunlight, but a soft, shimmering luminescence that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. Chris blinked, unsure if his eyes were playing tricks on him. But the light persisted, growing in intensity until it coalesced into a distinct form. Emerging from a beautifully adorned pot that sat inconspicuously in the corner of the room, the light took on the shape of a figure. As the brilliance dimmed, Chris found himself staring at Ruie, an ethereal being who seemed to be crafted from the very essence of magic itself. Her presence was otherworldly, with shimmering skin that reflected a myriad of colors and eyes that held the depth of galaxies. She wore a flowing garment that seemed woven from stardust, each movement creating ripples of light around her. Ruie's graceful form floated just above the ground, her serene expression contrasting sharply with the bewilderment on Chris's face. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was a harmonious blend of musical notes, soothing and enchanting. She introduced herself, revealing that she had the ability to grant 3 wishes to whoever found her. Chris, his initial skepticism replaced by a growing sense of wonder, listened intently. He had read about such beings in fairy tales and legends, but never in his wildest dreams had he imagined encountering one. The surrealness of the morning's events seemed to converge in this moment, creating a tapestry of the extraordinary that was both exhilarating and overwhelming. Half-jokingly, yet driven by a subconscious curiosity, Chris wished for rain. His mundane request was met with Ruie's knowing smile, and within moments, the sky outside darkened. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and a gentle downpour began, its rhythmic patter providing a stark contrast to the silence that filled the room. As Chris stared out the window, mesmerized by the sudden change in weather, he began to grasp the gravity of Ruie's presence. The rain was proof of her power, a tangible manifestation of the magic that enveloped her. Yet, with this realization came a flurry of questions and doubts. The potential of the remaining wishes loomed large, each one fraught with the promise of possibility and the peril of consequence. Ruie's eyes, sparkling with wisdom and an unspoken melancholy, seemed to peer into the depths of Chris's soul. She urged him gently to consider his next wishes carefully. Chris, however, felt a hesitation that stemmed from deep within. Chris's mind was still buzzing with the morning's events as he walked through the front door of his modest apartment. The interior was unremarkable but cozy, a reflection of his unpretentious lifestyle. His eyes were tired, and his thoughts kept drifting back to the dark, mysterious waves that had nearly claimed his life. As he entered the living room, he noticed a peculiar, shimmering light emanating from the corner of the room. His curiosity was piqued, and he cautiously approached. There, emerging from a beautifully adorned pot decorated with intricate designs of ancient symbols and celestial motifs, stood Ruie. She wasn't just standing, she seemed to radiate grace and an otherworldly aura. The room suddenly felt larger, almost infinite, as if Ruie's presence had expanded its very dimensions. Ruie was an ethereal being with a translucent form that shimmered under the light, reflecting a spectrum of colors that seemed to dance around her. Her appearance defied conventional descriptions. She seemed fragile yet immensely powerful, with eyes that held centuries of wisdom and a voice that sounded like a symphony of whispers. She was otherworldly, with flowing, crystalline hair and garments that moved as though they were made of liquid light. Chris stepped back, his pulse quickening. His rational mind struggled to comprehend what he was witnessing. "Who, or what, are you?" he managed to stammer. Without moving her lips, Ruie's voice filled the room, enveloping him in a cocoon of serene yet powerful energy. "I am Ruie, a guardian bound by ancient magic. I have come to you because you are worthy. I can grant you 3 wishes." Chris's skepticism was palpable, yet the logical part of his mind grappled with the impossible reality before him. In an attempt to dismiss the surreal experience, he let out a half-hearted chuckle and quipped, "Fine, then. I wish for rain." What happened next shattered his skepticism. The sky, clear and bright just a moment ago, began to darken as if responding to an ancient summons. Heavy clouds rolled in, and within moments, a gentle rain started to fall. Chris could feel the raindrops as they tapped against the window, each drop reaffirming the undeniable truth. Ruie smiled, a look of serene satisfaction on her face. She had proven her capabilities, and now she awaited Chris's next wish, though she harbored worries about the consequences of such magic. Chris himself was enveloped in a whirlwind of emotions, disbelief, wonder, and a growing sense of responsibility. "Each of your wishes holds power beyond your understanding," Ruie cautioned, her eyes silently urging him to be wise. "Be mindful of the price that might come with them." As the rain continued to fall, Chris felt an unexplained connection forming between them, an unspoken bond that transcended the physical and delved into the dimensions of the soul. They spent the following days in extensive conversations, sharing stories and unveiling parts of themselves they hadn't shown to anyone. Each day, this enigmatic being seemed less a celestial entity and more a kindred spirit. Chris shared his aspirations, a singer's dream that had become marooned amidst life's hardships. He unveiled the sorrow that had anchored him, particularly the painful memory of losing his younger brother to a tragic accident. As he spoke, Ruie's eyes mirrored his sadness, filled with empathy that transcended any human connection he had ever experienced. Ruie, in turn, spoke of her existence bound by magic. While it was enigmatic, her life was also isolated. She revealed the complex mechanics that tied her to the physical plane. The beautifully adorned pot was her vessel, a relic anchoring her to the human world. Her magical constraints dictated her existence. She could grant wishes, but the cost was a gnawing pain of ceaseless servitude. One particularly poignant evening under a canopy of stars, the air thickened with unsaid emotions. Ruie's luminescence was subtly dimmer, a reflection of the weariness in her heart. She cautiously broke the stillness, confessing her profound affection for Chris. This wasn't just a declaration of love, it was a culmination of days spent in emotional and intellectual intimacy. The words lingered in the air, laden with vulnerability and hope. For Chris, her confession was a double-edged sword. While he was undeniably moved, his own heart had been cauterized by past traumas. I can't, he said hesitantly, his voice cracking under the weight of suppressed emotions. The specter of attachment and eventual loss loomed large, forbidding any thoughts of reciprocating her feelings. He was torn between the solace Ruie provided and the fear of inevitable heartbreak. Ruie's anguish was almost tangible. Her ethereal visage seemed to flicker, as if the very light that sustained her dimmed momentarily. The emotional torment was exacerbated by the reluctance she saw in Chris, the one person she thought she could trust with her heart. She pleaded with fervor, urging Chris to use his remaining wishes, hoping that liberation from her magical constraints would bring an end to her torment. The atmosphere in the room grew thick with tension and unresolved emotions. They sat in daunting silence, each contemplating the other's pain. Days turned into nights, colored by a complex dance of unspoken truths and unrealized possibilities. Chris was plagued by an internal conflict that gnawed at his very being. His mind was a paradox of yearning and fear. He could sense the growing desperation in Ruie's otherwise serene eyes, which were now frequently clouded with melancholy. In an unguarded moment of irrational anger and confusion, Chris felt a surge of emotion he could no longer contain. The words escaped his mouth before he could fully comprehend their impact. "I wish you would return to your place of origin forever." The moment the words left his lips, an icy silence enveloped the room. Reality seemed to suspend itself, acknowledging the gravitas of his wish. Ruie's form began to flicker, her radiance weakening as each second passed. The air grew heavy with sorrow, and Chris realized too late the gravity of his rash decision. Panic washed over him like the waves that had almost claimed his life earlier that day. Ruie's essence needed the presence of her essential flower to sustain her strength in this world, and without it, her departure was imminent. Guilt and newfound clarity collided within Chris, transforming his previous indecision into fierce resolve. He knew he had to rectify his mistake, to find this vital flower and offer Ruie a lifeline. He ventured out of his apartment into the night, driven by desperation and an unspoken promise to save her. His journey led him through perilous landscapes, each more treacherous than the last. The skies darkened, and the air thickened with an ominous foreboding. Chris's determination was unwavering, though every step seemed laden with new challenges. Weeks elapsed, with Chris and Ruie growing increasingly intertwined in each other's lives. His once mundane existence was now colored by the brilliant hues of their shared experiences. Ruie, with her ethereal beauty and enigmatic nature, became the focal point of Chris's universe. The townsfolk, once skeptical of Chris's strange behaviors and newfound secrecy, began whispering tales of magic and mythical creatures. Yet, to Chris, the outside world dimmed in comparison to the luminous presence of Ruie. Each day, he would find Ruie waiting in his living room, her form shimmering in and out of existence as though tethered to the whims of an unseen force. They would exchange stories, and Chris found himself opening up in ways he never had before. He spoke of his childhood, his parents' untimely death, and how music became his sanctuary. But it wasn't until a particularly stormy evening that the conversation took a somber turn. Rain lashed against the windows, and the power had flickered out, cloaking the house in darkness. It was in that moment, with only the faint, otherworldly glow of Ruie illuminating the room, that Chris divulged the painful story of his brother's demise. His voice trembled as he recounted the hiking accident, the unscalable mountain they had attempted, and the fall that claimed his brother's life before his very eyes. Guilt had clung to him like a second skin ever since, a constant reminder of his perceived failure. Ruie's ethereal blue eyes softened as she listened. Her heart, though bound by her magical constraints, ached for Chris. She reached out, a hand composed of light and energy, and touched his cheek, a gesture that conveyed more comfort than words ever could. Through their shared silence, they both understood that pain and loss were universal, transcending their different worlds. In the subsequent days, the weather turned colder, mirroring the growing tension between Chris and Ruie. Chris could sense an unspoken weight in the air, as though the bond they shared carried consequences beyond his understanding. Ruie became more insistent on him using the remaining wishes. Her demeanor, once serene and patient, now bore a sense of urgency that unsettled Chris. His hesitation stemmed not from distrust, but from the fear of the unknown repercussions that such powerful magic could entail. One particularly clear night, under an expanse of stars that seemed to stretch infinitely, Ruie finally confessed her love for Chris. There was a vulnerability in her voice, a fragility that Chris had never witnessed before. Conflicted emotions coursed through him like a storm at sea. Here was a being of immense power and beauty professing her love, and yet he found himself unable to reciprocate. His heart was a maze of unresolved grief and the fear of loving something that could be lost. His rejection, though gentle, was a dagger through Ruie's heart. Tears, crystalline droplets of light, cascaded down her cheeks. Her luminous form flickered, the pain of her magical and emotional bindings intensifying. She pleaded with him to make the remaining wishes, a desperate attempt to liberate herself from the torment. Chris, torn between his feelings and the ethical implications, remained paralyzed by indecision. Chris wandered aimlessly one evening, haunted by thoughts of his brother and the pain he saw in Ruie's eyes. It was then that he stumbled upon an ancient, dilapidated library, a relic of times forgotten. Drawn to its antiquity and the promise of hidden knowledge, he ventured inside. Dusty tomes lined the shelves, ancient symbols and languages adorning their spines. One particular book, bound in weathered leather and inscribed with golden runes, caught his eye. Opening it, Chris was met with intricately illustrated pages depicting ancient rituals, magical beings, and the intertwining of their fates with humans. A section on wish-bearers detailed the complexities and consequences of their existence. As he read, it became clear that Ruie's plea was not merely for liberation, it was a plea for survival. The magical constraints binding her to the physical realm were depleting her essence, a slow and painful withering that only Chris's remaining wishes could alleviate. Beneath the surface of these illustrations and descriptions, Chris realized the ethical quandaries he faced were immense. He had already seen the incredible power that Ruie possessed, but at what cost? The rain that fell upon his first wish had consequences he couldn't fully grasp yet. The power to alter reality was a double-edged sword, and each of his choices would ripple out, possibly altering the fabric of reality in unimaginable ways. His love for Ruie was tinged with the dread of what might come if he used, or declined to use, his final wishes. Returning home, he found Ruie's condition worsening. The glow that once surrounded her had dimmed, her appearances were more fleeting, and her energy seemed depleted. She floated in and out of the fabric of reality, her form becoming increasingly ghost-like. The sight of her in such a state forced Chris to confront his internal struggle head-on. He could no longer ignore the imminent danger she faced. As he sat at her side, watching her fade in and out of existence, Chris wondered if perhaps his fear of attachment and loss was overshadowing his ability to act morally. He understood that his remaining wishes held the power to save her, but with each wish came the responsibility of unintended consequences. This ethical dilemma left his mind in turmoil. The nights grew longer and colder, and Ruie's condition continued to deteriorate. The once vibrant connection they shared was overshadowed by an impending sense of doom. As he lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling through sleepless eyes, a resolution began to form. His heart ached with the sacrifice he was about to make, but he knew that love, true love, often came with immense sacrifice. It wasn't enough to feel for Ruie, he had to act for her, despite the consequences. And so, with a heavy heart and a newfound resolve, Chris went to confront Ruie one final time under the starlit sky. As her shimmering form flickered into view, he whispered the words that would dictate their fate forever. The air hung heavy with tension as Chris stood alone in his dimly lit living room, the reality of his recent outburst sinking in. He had wished Ruie, the enigmatic being who had woven herself into the fabric of his life, back to her place of origin. The gravity of his words reverberated through the room as Ruie's ethereal glow dimmed, her shimmering form becoming translucent. Her eyes, once filled with a mesmerizing light, now radiated a look of sheer betrayal and sorrow. The bond they had shared, forged through secret smiles and shared pain, seemed to fray at the edges. Chris's heart hammered in his chest as guilt surged through him, a turbulent sea threatening to drown his rational thoughts. He realized too late the unspoken depths of his feelings for Ruie. Driven by an overwhelming urge to right his wrongs, Chris made a vow to rescue Ruie from her remedial departure. But to do so, he had to find the vital flower, a rare and mystical bloom, possessing the life essence that could restore her. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty and danger. Ruie had mentioned in passing that the flower only grew in a distant, perilous realm, protected by ancient guardians. With resolve stealing his spirit, Chris grabbed his backpack, packing it with supplies for the arduous journey. The memory of Ruie's weakening state fueled his determination, each heartbeat reminding him of the scant time left. He ventured beyond the safety of his familiar coastal town, through verdant forests and over rugged mountains, each landscape more treacherous than the last. The world seemed bigger and more hostile than he had ever imagined. Razor-sharp rocks and treacherous cliffs tested his endurance. Nightfall brought eerie silences punctuated by the cries of unseen creatures, shadows seeming to whisper ominous secrets about his slim chances of success. Days blurred together, each step forward an exertion of sheer will. The skies, often a comforting expanse of cerulean blue, seemed to frown upon his quest, dark clouds mirroring his inner turmoil. At times, doubt began to creep in, the enormity of his task nearly overwhelming him. The path he tread was fraught with moments of introspective reflection, harsh truths melding with the landscape's unforgiving nature. The scorching sun by day and freezing cold by night were relentless adversaries, each representing facets of his internal struggle. One evening, exhausted and on the brink of despair, Chris stumbled upon a rocky outcrop. His eyes, bleary with fatigue, noticed a faint glow emanating from a crevice. A surge of hope propelled him forward, and he discovered a cavern hidden behind a waterfall. The sound of cascading water filled the air, a beautiful yet haunting symphony that mirrored the conflict in his soul. Inside the cavern, bioluminescent fungi cast an eerie glow, illuminating ancient carvings on the walls. The air was filled with a palpable sense of timelessness and wisdom. As he ventured deeper, the carvings depicted the trials of past seekers, those who had come before him in search of the same elusive flower. Their faces bore witness to a legacy of sacrifice and determination. In the heart of the cavern, surrounded by a bed of luminous moss, stood the flower. Its petals were a surreal blend of iridescent hues, shifting from deep purples to radiant golds. The flower pulsed with an otherworldly energy, a flicker of luminescence that seemed to respond to Chris's presence. But as he reached out to grasp it, a booming voice stopped him in his tracks. A towering figure emerged from the shadows, Liz, the guardian of the flower. Her presence was imposing, her features sharp and regal, as if she were a figure carved from the very rock itself. Her eyes glinted with wisdom and scrutiny, evaluating Chris with an intensity that felt almost physical. "Who dares disturb the sanctity of this place?" Liz's voice resonated through the cavern, echoing off the walls and filling the space with an undeniable authority. Chris's heart raced, but he stood firm, drawing upon the depths of his desperation and resolve. "My name is Chris," he managed to say, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his insides. "I seek the flower to save someone dear to me, someone whose life depends on it." Liz's gaze narrowed, her eyes piercing into his very soul. "Many have come before you, driven by motives both noble and selfish. What makes you believe you are worthy of this gift?" Chris swallowed hard, the weight of her question pressing down on him. He felt the cumulative burden of every step he had taken, every ounce of pain and determination that had propelled him to this moment. "I made a mistake," he confessed, his voice tinged with raw emotion. In a moment of anger, I sent away someone I care about deeply. I seek to right my wrong, to save her from a fate she doesn't deserve. Liz studied him for a long moment, her expression inscrutable. Chris felt as though she were measuring the very essence of his soul. Finally, she extended her hand, revealing the flower nestled in her open palm. "Take it, Chris," she said. "But remember, this flower's power comes at a cost. The journey you took, the trials you faced, are a reflection of the sacrifice required to wield it." With a profound sense of gratitude and newfound responsibility, Chris accepted the flower. It felt warm in his hands, its petals soft and delicate yet brimming with potent energy. Liz's lips curved into a knowing smile, a glimmer of admiration in her eyes. "May you use it wisely," she said, her voice softer now, almost encouraging. With the flower in his possession, Chris made the arduous journey back to his coastal town. The landscapes he had traversed now seemed to blur past him, a mere backdrop to his hastened pace. Each step closer to home renewed his resolve, the weight of the flower a reminder of the limited time left to save Ruie. By the time he reached the familiar shores, Chris was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The once comforting sands felt foreign under his feet as he approached the beach where Ruie had first appeared. Her presence was now a faint shadow, a flickering light dimmed by his wish. As he reached the water's edge, he saw her. Ruie stood there, her form translucent against the backdrop of the setting sun, her once vibrant energy barely a flicker. Chris's heart constricted at the sight, a pang of guilt and regret surging through him. He clutched the flower tightly, every fiber of his being focused on saving her. Without hesitation, Chris cast the flower into the sea, its petals swirling as they touched the water, merging with the ocean's depths. The energy from the flower seemed to pulse through the waves, spreading like a ripple of life. Ruie's form began to solidify, her ethereal glow returning as the flower's essence took hold. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The tranquil symphony of waves crashing against the shore greeted Chris as he stepped onto the familiar sands of the beach. The sun was just beginning its ascent, casting a golden hue over the horizon. The air was cool and carried with it a poignant sense of melancholy, a reminder of the journey that had brought him to this pivotal moment. Chris felt an unprecedented mixture of anticipation and sorrow as he approached the water's edge, the weight of the delicate flower nestled securely in his palm. This wasn't just any flower, it was the lifeblood of Ruie, the mystical being who had integrated herself into the very fabric of his existence. The flower, with its iridescent petals and otherworldly glow, was essential for Ruie's freedom but also signaled the end of their intertwined fates. As he drew closer to the shoreline, Chris's footsteps grew heavier, each one echoing with the memories of their shared experiences. They had traversed emotional landscapes, joy, sorrow, anger, love, all meshing together to create a bond that transcended conventional understanding. The ocean, with its vast and unending expanse, seemed to Chris a mirror of his internal turmoil, reflecting the complexities of his heart. Ruie was there, standing serenely at the water's edge. Her usual ethereal glow had dimmed significantly, a clear testament to the draining power of the wish that bound her. Despite her weakened state, her eyes shone with a mixture of longing and acceptance. Chris hesitated, feeling the weight of his final decision like an anchor around his heart. In this quintessential moment, Chris realized the profundity of his journey. He had found not only a mystical being but also himself amidst the trials and tribulations they had faced. As he cast the flower into the ocean, a wave of emotion surged through him. The ocean accepted the offering with a tranquil grace, and an almost imperceptible ripple spread across the surface, signifying that Ruie was finally free. A radiant light enveloped Ruie as she began to fade, her form dissolving into shimmering particles that danced in the air before blending into the sea's vastness. Her parting glance held a depth of love and gratitude that needed no words. It was an eternal farewell, a final, silent testament to the impact they had on each other's lives. With Ruie gone, an unfamiliar emptiness filled Chris. The beach, a place once brimming with solace and clarity, now felt like a canvas wiped clean, awaiting new strokes of destiny. As dawn transitioned into the early morning, Chris walked along the shore, his mind a whirlpool of memories and reflective thoughts. But this sense of emptiness was short-lived. By a twist of fate, or perhaps the lingering magic of Ruie's influence, Chris encountered a woman further down the beach. Her appearance was strikingly similar to Ruie's. Her features exuded the same sense of serene beauty and otherworldliness. She introduced herself as Alia, and as Chris got to know her, he realized that she was as human as he was, yet there was an undeniable connection, a resonance that felt almost predestined. Alia's presence offered him an unexpected glimpse of closure, yet she also presented the tantalizing possibility of a new beginning. Chris and Alia spent the day talking and sharing stories. There was an instant comfort between them, as if their spirits recognized each other. Through their conversation, Chris recounted the emotional odyssey he had just completed, though he left out the mystical elements, framing his journey with Ruie as metaphorical rather than literal. Alia listened with an attentive compassion that mirrored Ruie's. She offered her own tales of love, loss, and redemption, weaving her narrative seamlessly into the tapestry of their emerging relationship. They discovered shared dreams and aspirations, finding common ground in their individual quests for meaning and purpose. As the evening approached, the beach basked in the soft glow of twilight, and the tranquil song of the waves served as the perfect backdrop for their burgeoning bond. They stood at the same spot where Chris had bid farewell to Ruie, the ocean now holding a promise of new beginnings rather than an end. In this serene setting, Chris found himself reflecting on the life lessons he had acquired through his journey. With Ruie, he had learned the undeniable importance of confronting his deepest emotions. He realized that true liberation came not from the granting of wishes, but from understanding and accepting vulnerability. His journey had taught him that letting go could pave the way for unimagined paths and new horizons. Chris looked at Alia and understood that his story was far from over. The experiences with Ruie had carved profound imprints into his soul, and they now served as guiding beacons for his future. Alia was not a replacement for Ruie, but rather a new chapter in a book that was still being written. In her, he saw hope, promise, and the potential for a love unburdened by past regrets. Their hands instinctively found each other's, fingers intertwining in a connection that felt both fragile and unbreakable. A silence enveloped them, filled with the unspoken promises of shared adventures and the raw beauty of human connections. As they stood there, bathed in the last light of the setting sun, Chris felt a sense of peace he had never known. The ocean continued its eternal dance, a reminder of the infinite cycles of beginnings and endings. The world, in that precise moment, seemed boundless and full of potential. Chris and Alia's newfound bond encapsulated the essence of his journey, serving as a moral beacon for anyone who dared to confront their fears, embrace the unknown, and ultimately let go. It was a poignant denouement that left a lingering sense of serenity and optimism, a final act that spoke to the power of transformation and the indomitable spirit of hope. With the horizon stretching endlessly before them, Chris knew that life, with all its trials and tribulations, was an ever-evolving tapestry. Each thread, whether colored by joy or sorrow, pain or love, contributed to its intricate and beautiful design. And in that realization, amidst the dance of the waves and the whisper of the wind, Chris found a renewed sense of purpose, ready to embrace whatever came next in his epic journey. As the sun dipped below the horizon, signaling the end of one day and the beginning of another, the beach enveloped Chris and Alia in a comforting embrace. Their silhouettes, standing together against the backdrop of the infinite sea, captured a moment of sublime clarity, a testament to the enduring power of love, loss, and renewal. In the end, the narrative of Chris and Ruie, interwoven with magic and mysticism, had transformed into a tale of enduring human connections, illuminating the path forward with a gentle yet resounding truth. In the face of destiny and desire, it is our willingness to let go and embrace the unknown that truly sets us free. If you liked this story based on real events, subscribe to our channel and don't forget to like it. Here you can dive into a different reality every day, where anything can happen. Comment below what kind of story you would like to hear here. Thank you very much for your attention. We are the Sci-Fi family.